Picture two people, both turning 78 next month. One of them needs a hand to get up from the couch, gets winded walking to the mailbox, and hasn't slept through the night in years. The other just got back from a hike, still drives herself everywhere, and remembers every name at her grandson's birthday party without missing a beat. Same number of birthdays, completely different bodies, completely different lives. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The calendar has almost nothing to do with it. I've spent over 3 decades in medicine, and if there's one lesson that's been hammered into me again and again, it's this. Age in years is one of the least useful numbers in the room. What actually matters, what actually predicts whether someone spends their 80s traveling and gardening or spends them in a hospital bed, comes down to a small set of abilities. Not luck, not some rare genetic lottery ticket. Abilities. Things you can test for, train, and in most cases, rebuild, no matter what your driver's license says. Today, I want to walk you through 8 of them. Consider this a quiet checkup you can do on yourself right now without a stethoscope or a waiting room. By the end, you'll know exactly where you stand. And more importantly, exactly what to do about it if a few of these need work. And stick around, because the ones near the end of this list are the ones almost nobody talks about, even though they might matter more than everything else combined. Before we get into it, I'd love to know, what's one thing you can still do today that you're genuinely proud of? A hike, a dance class, a full day on your feet in the garden? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone, and honestly, they're the best part of doing this. I want to be upfront about something too. This isn't a list of rare superpowers reserved for the genetically blessed. Every single ability on this list was, at some point, completely ordinary for you. You didn't need to think about getting up off the floor when you were 40. You didn't plan your walking route halfway through. What changes over the decades isn't some mysterious force. It's simply whether these systems keep getting used or quietly get left alone. And systems that get left alone in the body, just like anywhere else, tend to fade. The encouraging part, the part I want you to really sit with, is that the reverse is just as true. Systems that get used again tend to come back. So think of this less as a scorecard and more as a map. Some of these 8 you'll breeze through without a second thought. Others might catch you off guard. Neither reaction is a verdict on your future. It's just useful information, the same way stepping on a scale or checking your blood pressure is useful information. What you do with it afterward is what actually matters. Let's start from the ground up. Literally. Can you get up off the floor without using your hands? Try it sometime when no one's watching. Sit down on the floor, then stand back up without touching the ground, a chair, or your knees for support. If that sounds almost impossible, you're not alone, but it's worth paying attention to because this one, movement quietly tells a story about your legs, your core, your hips, and your balance all at once. Here's what's happening in the background as we get older. Somewhere after 65, the body starts losing a particular type of muscle fiber. The fast, explosive kind that fires instantly when you trip, when you catch yourself, when you need to react in a split second rather than think about it. Slow, steady muscle endurance tends to hang around longer. It's the fast stuff, the reflexive power, that fades first if you're not actively using it. And that fast twitch strength is exactly what stands between a stumble and a serious fall. I think about a woman I worked with years ago, mid-70s, sharp as a tack, but she'd started having close calls getting out of low chairs. Nothing dramatic yet, just a wobble here, a grab for the armrest there. We didn't do anything exotic, just consistent practice. Sitting down on the floor and standing back up a few times a week alongside simple resistance work for the legs and hips. Within a few months, she wasn't thinking about it anymore. She was just doing it. That's the goal, not a party trick, but confidence your body carries without you having to consciously manage it. If you want to build this back, start small. A few times a week, lower yourself to the floor and rise again, using as little help as you need right now. A hand on a chair is fine to start. Over time, take the support away. Pair it with basic leg strengthening movements, and don't underestimate the basics like adequate protein and vitamin D, both of which play a real role in keeping muscle tissue responsive as we age. What I find most encouraging about this particular marker is how quickly it responds to practice. Unlike some of the deeper, slower, moving processes we'll talk about later, floor-to-stand strength is remarkably trainable in a matter of weeks, not years. It's one of those rare places in the body where consistent, modest effort produces a result you can actually feel and see in a fairly short window of time. That kind of quick, visible progress is exactly the sort of thing that keeps people motivated to keep going. Next, can you stand on one leg for 10 seconds with your eyes open? This feels like something out of gym class, but it's a genuinely elegant way to check in on your nervous system. Balancing on one leg isn't just a muscle task, it's a full-body communication exercise. Your inner ear, your The unfortunate truth is that this system, like most things we don't actively use, tends to go quiet with age unless we keep exercising it. The earliest signs of that decline usually show up long before an actual fall happens, which is exactly why this is worth checking now rather than waiting for a wake-up call. The fix here is refreshingly low effort. Balance on one leg while you brush your teeth. Every morning, every night, switch sides halfway through. Once that feels change forces your brain to rely far more heavily on input from your joints and inner ear, which is exactly the kind of challenge that keeps this system sharp. It costs you nothing but 2 minutes you are already going to spend at the sink. I like to describe this system to patients as a set of telephone lines running between your feet, your inner ear, and your brain. Lines that get used, stay clear and responsive. Lines that sit idle start to develop static, and eventually the signal gets unreliable right when you need it most. Stepping off a curb, catching yourself on uneven ground, reaching for something on a high shelf while standing on one foot. The wonderful thing about balance training is that it doesn't require equipment, a gym membership, or even extra time carved out of your day. It just requires you to notice the small windows you already have and use them on purpose instead of letting them pass by. Third, can you walk about a quarter mile, roughly 4 blocks, without needing to stop and rest? It sounds unremarkable until you understand what's actually being tested. Walking endurance draws on your heart, your lungs, and, maybe surprisingly, your mitochondria, the microscopic structures inside your cells that generate energy. As WE age, the number and efficiency of those mitochondria naturally decline. Less energy. Production means less stamina, which means shorter walks, which means even less mitochondrial activity. It's a downward spiral that feeds itself, unless you interrupt it. And here's the good news. Walking is one of the few interventions that directly reverses this. Regular walking actually stimulates your body to build new, more efficient mitochondria. You're not just maintaining your engine, you're upgrading it one walk at a time. My advice is simple. Don't just walk on a treadmill if you can help it. Walk outside, on real ground, with slight variations in terrain. Your brain has to work a little harder to navigate uneven pavement or a grassy path. And that extra engagement is a bonus you don't get from a flat belt under fluorescent lights. Start with whatever distance feels honest for you today and add a little more each week. Slow, steady progress beats a single heroic effort every time. There's also something worth mentioning here that rarely gets said out loud. Walking pace itself tends to reflect overall health more honestly than people expect. It's not about racing anyone or hitting an arbitrary number on a fitness tracker. It's that a body running well tends to move at a natural, unhurried, confident pace, and a body under strain tends to slow down long before anything else. Slower over the past year or two, that's not something to panic about, but it is worth treating as a signal worth responding to rather than ignoring. Fourth, can you hold a conversation while doing something physical at the same time? Talking while you walk, chatting while you cook, following a podcast while you garden. This one sounds almost too ordinary to matter, but it's actually a remarkably sensitive test of brain health because it requires several different mental systems to cooperate simultaneously. The part of your brain that plans movement, the part that manages memory, and the part responsible for focused attention, all firing together without tripping over each other. When that coordination starts to break down, one of the earliest signs is what researchers sometimes describe informally as stopping to talk, needing to pause walking in order to speak, because the brain can no longer comfortably run both processes at once. It's subtle, and it's often dismissed as nothing. But it's frequently one of the earliest whispers of cognitive change, showing up well before anything more obvious does. The good news is, this is trainable, almost like a game. Try solving a simple math problem out loud while you walk. Cook a new recipe while catching up with a friend on the phone. Deliberately stack a physical task, and a mental one throughout your day. You're not just staying entertained, you're actively exercising the very connections that keep your mind quick. Think about how naturally children do this without ever trying. Running, laughing, arguing about the rules of a game, and negotiating who goes first, all at the exact same time without any of it feeling effortful. That effortless multitasking is a skill, not a given, and like any skill, it can quietly atrophy if it isn't used. The good news is that it can also be rebuilt at almost any age, simply by choosing, on purpose, to stop treating movement and thinking as two separate activities that have to happen one after the other. Before we go further, if any of this is landing for you, if you're starting to think about your own body a little differently right now, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I put a genuine amount of research and care into these videos because I think people deserve real, usable information about aging well, not vague reassurances, and we've still got the most important signs ahead, so don't wander off yet. Fifth, can you read ordinary print without needing to hold it at arm's length or reach for magnification? Vision tends to get filed under cosmetic concerns, something to fix with reading glasses and forget about, but your eyes are More revealing than most people realize. The blood vessels and nerve tissue in the retina are, quite literally, an extension of your central nervous system. And window doctors can look through to get clues about what's happening elsewhere in the brain. As the eyes age, several things happen at once. The pupil narrows, the lens yellows slightly, and the retina's ability to repair itself slows down. None of this is alarming on its own. It's a normal part of aging. But when vision problems go uncorrected and unaddressed for years, some research suggests the compensatory strain and reduced visual input may be linked to a faster pace of cognitive change, likely because so much of how we navigate the world, remember faces, and stay mentally engaged depends on clear sight. If you needed a reason to eat more leafy greens, here it is. Kale, spinach, and other dark greens are rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, two nutrients your eyes accumulate specifically to protect the retina from oxidative damage. Pair that with getting your eyes checked regularly, not just for new. I'd also gently push back on a habit I see constantly, people putting off an eye exam because it's just aging, or because they've already accepted a certain amount of blur as inevitable. An eye exam isn't only about updating a prescription. It's one of the few checkups where a trained professional can look directly at living blood vessels and nerve tissue without any invasive procedure at all. Treat it the way you'd treat a blood pressure check, not an optional errand you get around to eventually. Sixth, can you remember a short list of items half an hour after hearing them without writing anything down? Someone asks you to grab 4 things from the store. 30 minutes later, with no notes, no reminders. Can you still name all 4? This kind of short-term recall relies heavily on a small seahorse-shaped structure deep in your brain called the hippocampus, and it happens to be one of the very first regions affected when cognitive decline begins, which makes it an unusually honest, unusually early barometer. But here's what I find genuinely hopeful about this one. Memory isn't a fixed resource slowly draining away on its own schedule. It responds, quite dramatically, to novelty, stimulation, and emotional engagement. People who still feel real anticipation, who genuinely look forward to a dinner with friends or a weekend trip or learning something new, tend to hold on to sharper memory for longer. That's not a coincidence. It's not just personality. Anticipation is powered by dopamine, the same chemical messenger involved in motivation, focus, and the drive to keep engaging with life. And dopamine pathways stay remarkably responsive to how we use them well into old age. So here's a practical habit worth adopting. Put something small on the calendar to look forward to every single week. It doesn't need to be a big trip. A new recipe, a phone call with an old friend, a class you've been curious about, a different walking route. Novelty isn't just pleasant, it's genuine stimulation for a part of your brain that needs to be used to stay sharp, constantly deciding what's worth holding on to. A brain that's bored, understimulated, and running the exact same routine day after our day has very little reason to sharpen its recall. Nothing new is coming and worth remembering. A brain that's regularly handed something novel, something a little unfamiliar or exciting, has every reason to stay alert and engaged. That's not a metaphor either. It's a fairly literal description of how attention and memory formation actually work together. Seventh, how quickly do you bounce back after a minor setback? A cold, a rough night of sleep, a stretch of unusual fatigue? This one might be the most underrated marker on the entire list, because it isn't about any single system. It's about how well all your systems work together under a bit of pressure. Immune response, inflammation control, hormonal balance, energy production. Resilience is really a measure of your whole biological orchestra, not just one instrument. 2 people can be the exact same age and yet occupy completely different categories of health. One catches a cold and is fully back to normal in 3 or 4 days. The other takes weeks to shake the same illness and never quite feels like they've fully recovered before the next thing hits. That gap, how fast you return to baseline after a stressor, is one of the clearest, quietest signals of how well your body is actually aging underneath the surface. The reassuring part is that resilience isn't fixed. It responds to sleep quality, to enough protein in your diet, to regular movement, to time outdoors, and to genuine social connection, all of which help your body's recovery system stay flexible instead of brittle. Even something as simple as a daily